Coming up on Mountain News at 5:30, creating dialogue about how substance abuse impacts the workforce in Kentucky and how the state could improve its approach. We'll have more on the Kentucky Comeback Tour coming up. And a look at how abortion is expected to impact November's midterm elections.
Plus, the gorgeous fall pattern is back in place for this final week of September. The breakdown of some chilly lows coming up as Mountain News at 5:30 starts now.
Dedicated to Southern and Eastern Kentucky, this is WYMT Mountain News at 5:30.
Good evening, I'm Steve Hensley. Substance abuse and unemployment are topics that many Eastern Kentucky communities deal with, but one organization is working to impact the state's approach to substance abuse recovery, criminal justice reform, and other issues surrounding drug abuse and employment. WYMT's Alyssa Williams was at one of the Kentucky Chamber's Kentucky Comeback Tour stops to learn more.
Clay County officials, state representatives, and business leaders gathered at EKU's Manchester campus to learn how they can help Kentucky make a comeback.
This is actually one of our last stops on the Kentucky Comeback Tour. This is an initiative through the Kentucky Chamber, really looking at the impact that substance use disorder has throughout Kentucky.
Meetings like this give communities a chance to create a dialogue surrounding substance abuse, second chance employment, and other topics.
One of the main goals of the Comeback Tour is to really hear from Kentuckians on what they think needs to happen with resources to substance use disorder, how it's impacting the workforce, is there enough resources in terms of police officers and law enforcement and social workers, is there enough treatment facilities available?
Those with the Kentucky Chamber say they use the data collected from these meetings to see how they can help fill those gaps.
We also deal very heavily in the policy work and making sure that our lawmakers in Frankfort and in Washington, D.C. are listening to the feedback that we've gotten on this tour, working with them on policy solutions to really help curb some of these numbers.
And for Manchester officials, they say they're happy this area is getting the help it needs to help people get back to work.
It's a worldwide problem. It just ain't Manchester or Clay County or state of Kentucky. And I mean, people's got to be willing to help these people and go do what they need to do.
Helping Kentucky make a comeback, one meeting at a time. In Manchester, Alyssa Williams, WYMT Mountain News.
Kentucky Chamber of Commerce President and CEO Ashley Watt says although this Kentucky tour has come to a close, the Chamber has 2 full-time staff members committed to equal opportunity employment that will help continue this mission. Brett Favre could be in some legal hot water. New court filings reveal the Hall of Fame quarterback repeatedly pressed then Mississippi Governor Phil Bryant for money to build a volleyball facility at the University of Southern Mississippi. Favre's daughter played volleyball at the college at the time of the request. The issue emerged from an investigation into improperly spent public welfare funds within the state's Department of Human Services. Favre is not charged in the fraud scheme, but he has been named as a defendant in a civil suit related to the matter. Favre played in the National Football League for 20 seasons, mostly with the Green Bay Packers. Authorities in Virginia identified the body of a young woman last seen in 1975. The Fairfax County Police Department says the remains are of Patricia Agnes Gildawi. The 17-year-old skeletal remains were discovered in a drainage ditch in 2001. After years of investigation, cold case detectives started to work with forensic experts. Advanced testing eventually led to Gildawi's half-sister, and it helped confirm her identity. So far, there's no word on any potential suspects.
Well, I hope you've been able to get out and enjoy an absolutely beautiful Monday around the mountains. We have plenty of sunshine. We've seen it. We'll see more. Though I will say tonight it's getting a little chilly around the mountains, at least in some spots. 68, the current reading from the I-64 camera at Moorhead. And it's all quiet there, just a few fair weather clouds, blue sky otherwise, all of us right around 70 right now. That's about the common temperature really around the region. Warmest at 72, coolest over in Wise at 63. Just a few fair weather clouds out there so far. A few clouds trying to sneak in from the bluegrass. We'll be watching that, but the big thing to watch weather-wise as we've gone through the last little bit, this is Hurricane Ian, newly christened a Category 2 winds of 100 miles per hour. We'll have more on Ian and whether or not some impacts for us are on the way in a little while, but for tonight, nothing doing. Mostly clear, a little bit of patchy fog, or maybe even some patchy frost in some of those outlying locations. 43 a low tonight with winds on the calm side. All of those details and more coming up in just a little bit. Steve?
All right, thank you very much. I know a lot of folks in Florida very concerned about Ian. Well, with less than 45 days to go until the November midterms, the balance of power in Congress is hanging, well, in the balance. Experts predict Republicans will gain seats in the House of Representatives, though not nearly as many as expected, with abortion rights now on the minds of many voters. Democrats have seized on the issue as they fight to hold on to their slim majority. CBS's Skyler Henry has more from Capitol Hill.
The fight for power in Congress is tightening. The latest CBS News Battleground Tracker poll shows Republicans poised to win the House. But since July, the number of seats they're expected to win continues to shrink.
The Republicans are still in strong position to take control of the House. And the biggest reason for that is the economy.
CBS News Director of Elections and Surveys, Anthony Salvantos, says on the other side, the Supreme Court striking down Roe v. Wade has made abortion rights a motivating issue for Democrats.
Do you think that that is enough momentum to make sure that Dems keep control of the House and Senate?
In our polling, we see that for many Democrats, for many Democratic women, it's risen to be the top issue, if not a top issue.
It's a clear contrast for some self-identified Republican voters.
We need our gas prices down. We need our grocery prices down. Abortion is wrong.
Already ballots are being cast to decide the fate of Congress, with early voting underway in several states, including Minnesota and Virginia. In recent weeks, President Biden and former President Trump have faced off on political stages in an effort to drive turnout in an election where voters from both parties feel their rights and freedoms and their financial well-being are at stake. Skyler Henry, CBS News, Washington.
Well, by the end of this week, early in-person voting will have begun in at least 6 states. President Biden will host his first state dinner at the White House just before the end of the year, and the guest of honor will be French President Emmanuel Macron. Macron and his wife are slated to visit the U.S. on December 1st. The Biden administration says the two leaders will discuss shared global challenges and areas of bilateral interest. President Biden's first state dinner will come 2 years into his presidency. Preparations continue in central Tokyo for former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's state funeral. Police officers were on patrol as construction workers assembled stages outside the venue where a rare state funeral will be held tomorrow. Approximately 6,000 guests and 190 foreign delegations are expected to attend. A private funeral for Abe was held on July 12th, which was 4 days after he was killed. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern led a state memorial service for Queen Elizabeth today, saying the Pacific nation has had a deep connection with her as New Zealand paid tribute to the late monarch. Hundreds watched the state memorial service outdoors on the screen set to the Parliament grounds in Wellington, the national capital, as the closed-door ceremony began with a minute of silence at the Cathedral of St. Paul. Governor General Cindy Kiro also attended the service.
She showed us that through our lives, sometimes we can feel at the mercy of immense and indifferent forces. But what matters most remains always within our control. The small acts of goodness and generosity we perform each day.
New Zealand is one of 15 countries with the British monarch as the head of state, though the role is largely ceremonial. Former Republican Congressman Denver Riggleman appeared on 60 Minutes Sunday night ahead of the release of a new book documenting his time spent working as an investigator on the January 6th committee, and he had a startling revelation. CBS's Natalie Brand has more from Capitol Hill.
Days before a hearing of the Select Committee investigating January 6th, a former committee staffer is revealing new information about what he describes as a potential link between the White House and a rioter on that day.
The White House switchboard had connected to a rioter's phone while it's happening. That's a pretty big aha moment. You get an aha.
Wait a minute. Someone in the White House was calling one of the rioters while the riot was going on?
On January 6th, absolutely.
And you know who both ends of that call?
I only know one end of that call.
Denver Riggleman, appearing on CBS Mornings, said the call lasted just 10 seconds. He was asked whether it could have come from the former president.
I would say it's probably not probable, but on the other hand, we don't know what those extensions or those numbers are.
Riggleman, a former House member, served as a technical advisor for the committee, assessing data and phone records before leaving in April.
Without the advantage of the additional information we've gathered since he left the committee, it I think poses real risk to be suggesting things.
That's one of thousands of details that obviously the committee is aware of.
In its first public hearing since July, the January 6th committee on Wednesday is expected to reveal some new information and focus on ongoing threats. Natalie Brand, CBS News, Capitol Hill.
The trial of Oath Keepers founder Stuart Rhodes gets underway tomorrow. He's accused of plotting to attack the U.S. Capitol in an attempt to keep Donald Trump in the White House. The seditious conspiracy charges are the most serious criminal charges leveled against any of the January 6th attackers to date. Coming up on Mountain News at 5:30, first-time homebuyers are still struggling in the current housing market. An expert's take on why where you live could paint a brighter picture.
Well, did you like today? Well, plenty more of that where that came from this week. That breakdown's coming up.
WYMT News app offers a